Hello and welcome to NARC Live on Wednesday the 22nd of June 2022, coming to you live from Norfolk on the east coast of England with Tammy MQ0TC.
Hello.
And me, David GQ7URP. It's almost getting automatic just before we have to stop using it. Anyway, let's see what's on tonight's show. Propagation cycle 25. We've talked about it for ages, but are we really there now? We find out from Carl, K9LA, live from the US. Details of our upcoming Barford radio rally. I didn't expect that to happen.
No, I didn't expect that
doesn't
to
matter,
happen
Tammy.
either.
It doesn't matter. Anyways, coming up, we'll give you full details in a moment. You'll be able to see all of that as well. And we find out what on earth this is. Quite a few answers, really. It was 3 weeks since we met. Anyway, we'll come to that in a little while. If you see that now and you know specifically what that is, then drop it onto Facebook or BATC, and we'll, of course, read it out with the other entries. Okay, so let's first tell you about Barford then. Our Barford Radio Rally has been an annual event for many, many years. We did actually run it last year in a slightly limited way. It was all outside. But this year, I think it's fair to say it's returning pretty much to normal. And it's on Sunday, the 3rd of July. Now, we've got a slide up here, as you can see, with all of the details on there. Now, it's a Barford Ramplingham Village Hall, is what it's actually called. We'll be putting signs off the main road for that. But I think most of you probably have been to this rally before. You'll know exactly where it is. It's between 9 and 1, and that's for visitors. But if you're trading, and basically if you've not been to something like this before, and I know we've got a lot of newcomers to the hobby, and it's really a bit like a radio rally, the bit outside, where people, a bit like a car boot sale, the bit outside. So you can bring your car boot, you can bring tables and things like that, and a pitch would cost you just £8. You do not need to book that in advance. Okay, so if you are going to trade and if you're going to sell, you can arrive earlier at from 8 o'clock in the morning to set up ready for 9 o'clock. Now, as you can see there from that slide, there's an RSGB stand, there's a bring and buy, and a few traders indoors. We've still got 2 more tables left indoors. If you want to reserve a table, you do need to do that in advance. I can't tell you more than anybody pretty much what the weather's going to be like that day, but obviously you may want an indoor table if you prefer that. It's £10. If so, you pay on the day, but you do need to contact me first. I'm the main organizer of this event. Our details are the same as on this show, radio@dcpmicro.com. I think all of the other details that you should need are there on that slide, and of course they're also on our website, and they've been there for some time now. So that's 10 days' time on Sunday, the 3rd of July. We look forward to seeing many of you there. Now, on a slightly different subject, really, although not strictly amateur radio, you'll see why I'm going to mention it in a moment. Richard M6UES writes and says that several Freeview channels are going at the end of this month, as a whole multiplex, which is one of the main channels that these are all sent on, is going to be switched off for television and used for 5G mobile services. It's actually Com7, is the multiplex is going to be switched off. So many of those will move to spare channels on Freeview, but some will actually go completely, which I was surprised about. Like, for example, BBC News, which is transmitted on both HD and regular SD, is going to lose its HD channel. So it's just going to be on standard definition, and some other channels may go as well. Now, you may wonder why we're mentioning this on an amateur radio show. Well, Richard thought that some of us would be interested in this. They disappear, by the way, these channels at the 30th of June, because Ofcom have sold the license or licensed it, I suppose, to 5G people. But of course, it's a reminder for our hobby, really. We need to use these frequencies that we've got because we're living in an ever more wireless world. And I think what Richard's saying is really, think about it. Use these wonderful bands that we have, all of them, and especially some of the VHF and UHF frequencies, really. Otherwise, if we don't use them, some of these other commercial activities may put so much pressure on that we lose them. So it's a good reminder. Now, a few months ago, we talked about stamps, and Nev M0NFY, I think, was the first to tell us about the stamps that they're going to look like. Can we have a look at this, Tammy? And I think you all know now that the stamp on the left, the traditional Queen's head on the stamp, are going to be all replaced by early next year with one that you see at the bottom, which has got a built-in barcode. That's not two stamps there, that is one with a printed bit down the middle. Now, the Royal Mail are taking these back, and Nev said that he sent over £350 worth of nice of the old type stamps to them, and he received them all back in just 9 days, which is not bad, is it? Replacements for them. That's quite a lot of money's worth though. So if you've got some of those old stamps on the left, I think it was the end of January 2023 you've got, so you've got some time to do that. But there is one other thing as well, and Nev sent us that reminder and just tell us that his experience was good. But there's something else I'd just like to tell you that I read, that the QSL Bureau that does all the QSL cards are also concerned that, of course, a lot of the stamped addressed envelopes that they've got and that they're still getting have got these old stamps on them, and they will be no longer be able to be used from early next year. So if you are going to send any QSL envelopes to the Bureau and you're not absolutely certain they'll all be used up before the end of the year, for example, definitely send ones with those new stamps on it. So please be aware about that. Now, Paul G3VPT has sent us pictures. We do ask you to keep in touch, even though we're not meeting here on NARC Live every week. It's lovely to see your pictures and your stories. And he's sent us some pictures of this. It's a very, very friendly blackbird that they've got in their garden, asking to be fed. The beak full of dried mealworms, now soaked in hot water first, he says. Don't get mixed up with your breakfast, for goodness sake. And they'll be used to feed his young. How many more can he get in? And there's another one. The other picture there is the baby coming within inches of them as they're sitting down. Anyway, it's a lovely picture. Thanks very much for those pictures, Paul. Now, we also, from last month, I must admit, it was in May, and we just didn't get time in the last programme to show it. We had a lovely set of pictures from Bob, G6PWS, and we'll run through them now. I'll try and keep pace roughly with them. He sent us some lovely pictures from his recent trip to his sister's, who lives in Lochlinver. From there, they did a complete trip up and across the top of Scotland. They ended up at one of her sons in Helmsdale before the cross back over to Lochlinver. Some lovely weather while up there. Remember, this was from May. And some of the stags were down in the glens feeding. Feeding. My sister's son is the owner of the boat running up the loch towards Unipool. Chickens and stags are in the back garden as they wait to be fed whilst rooting in the bins. My sister's boyfriend took us up the glen near Scurry, where we saw the eagle and some more stags. I'll wait till that picture comes up because there are quite a few pictures here. They're wonderful pictures, aren't they? They look like just coming straight out of a magazine or something like that. Really good, Bob. I know you love your photography. And there's some more stags there, look at that.
There you can see the trip round that they took.
Yeah, that's quite a trek, isn't it?
It is.
He did actually say to us as well, his sister's boyfriend took off most of his clothes to stop any smells going up to those eagles before this, but they still saw them and then flew off just after that picture was taken that we saw a minute ago. Beautiful rainbow as well. Thank you very much. Now, also, Bob sent us some pictures from the Jubilee. The last time we met, actually, it was just about to happen. We were meeting on the Wednesday before the Jubilee. And this is from Bob, G6PWS. No disrespect meant, I'm sure.
Do you get it?
No.
No.
I think it's chess and stuff like that, isn't it? Yeah. I think that's what I get.
The Queen can move anywhere.
It's lovely, isn't it? Yeah. Oh, I see. No, I didn't get that bit.
Oh, you didn't get that? And she's standing like what looks on a chessboard.
That is really good. Was that from you, Bob? That's brilliant. Love that. And this picture as well that Bob sent us of part of the fly past that he saw.
We've got a little bit of video of that, so
okay.
I'll just set that going.
Lovely.
It's the Queen's Jubilee.
Queen's Jubilee, yeah,
Why are they
absolutely
going?
lovely. And they'll be lovely to look back on as well in a few years' time, I'm sure. Hopefully all of you had a good Jubilee as well. Now, just to round up your news, we got a couple of things. Firstly, from Stuart, M0JKB, who sent us this wonderful cartoon picture. He says, is this an eye test for G3s?
That is quite funny.
It is, isn't it? Da-dee-da-dee. I did it.
You're allowed to do it. Are you qualified?
No. Now, this next thing we can say, are you one of these people who likes this new fad, I think it is, or maybe fashion or whatever, called Wordle? She is. Sometimes we sit very late at night looking at this 5-letter word that you've got to guess what it is. It's as simple as that, really. It's a website. If you're interested in it, you don't have to pay for it. It's not an app or anything like that. You just go to a website called Wordle. Run, I think it's owned by the New York Times now. But it's just a different word every day. One word, you've got to guess what it is. And you've got 6 guesses to do it. I can't really explain any more than that because that's not fair to take up more of the programme tonight. But what we do want to show you is there's now a version of it for Morse lovers. And this programme here is called Morsel. Now, Tammy's going to go live on the website, I think, because it's really the best way to show you. So it's not maybe quite as pretty as the Wordle, but you can see there that you've got a daily Morse challenge. Do you want to start, Tammy?
I will. I don't know. I'm not sure if the volume will come through or not. Hang on.
Oh yeah, we can hear it. Good. Okay. So this is what you can do yourself. You're looking for Morse, and we're gonna give you the address in a moment. So there you are. You've got to guess what that 5-letter word is.
So I think what happens is you press this, because I don't obviously do this every day, but I think you press this and it plays it, and then you have to.
Oh, is it? Okay.
So
some of them have already.
If you can read that.
Just do it again, and I won't talk over the top of it.
I've got 20 goes remaining now.
That's pretty fast, isn't it? 40.
So then you have to guess.
Okay. If you keep doing it anyway, but okay. So then you have to guess what it is. But
it goes down.
Oh, it's going down.
It's going down now to 35 words per minute. But I still don't know what it is.
If we get down to 1 word per minute, I might be able to make it. Okay.
We've got somebody says they think it's strop. Okay.
Really?
Yep.
Oh wow. Oh, he's a Morse fiend, I think.
T.
Well, do you want to do the wrong one first or not?
R.
Okay.
No, because I think it's right. So if I press guess now.
Oh,
excellent.
I can't believe it. That was with help though. Anyway, you get the idea. If you've seen Wordle, that works in a very similar way, but you just type in with a little keyboard on your smartphone or your computer. This is using Morse. So if you like your Morse, or you want a good way of practicing Morse with a bit of fun, that seems to be a great way of doing it.
I'll just come back to us and then I can put the, hang on, because I need to let me put that. So that is the website for it.
So if you like Wordle and you like Morse, or you like to learn more about Morse and be a bit faster as well, then this is the address, https://morsel.fun, MORSLE.fun. Thank you very much to Neil, G4JUV, who sent us that. Really good.
I think I'll stick to Wordle though.
Yeah, especially when we do this. Literally at midnight, you get a new word, so you have to do it by midnight, don't you?
I say, I haven't done it yet today, I need help.
Quite fun.
Right, what's next?
Anyway, next, Tammy, it's your little people. Sorry, I'm going to make you work harder now. I'll give you a chance to find
the little people.
When we don't do this every week, you're not quite as polished, I think, and we have to have a little bit more practice than we do. Anyway, Tammy, here's your little people.
Here's the little people this week. I thought this is what happens when your sockets go red. It's because people are cooking little bits of bakery in them.
I hope that chap on the right is I hope that's on neutral.
Got welly boots on.
Yeah, isn't he? That's really, really good, isn't it? The US style of sockets.
Yeah, well, it's Japan, isn't it? So
Japan, of course it is.
They have a similar thing over there.
Did you know that in Hong Kong they use British plugs and sockets?
I think I did know that, actually.
Yeah. I couldn't believe that when I went there many, many years ago on business, that I was just taking normal plugs. Anyway, there we are. That's miniature-calendar.com. A new picture every day, and Tammy picks one for us every week. So, as we've seen, you've sent us lots of news, pictures and things like that. And I know we don't meet as much. We'll be meeting again in 3 weeks' time, actually. But we still love to hear your pictures. So if you see something out and about that you like, that you think we'll enjoy and your friends and the club will enjoy as well, then don't forget to send them to us. Send them to this address, radio@dcpmicro.com. We need them by the Wednesday of the NARC Live. So we've got several weeks, but don't forget us, will you? Do send it to us, because it's lovely to get that bit of news
Send it
and keeps us in
anytime.
touch. Absolutely, send it any time at all. The more time we get, the better it is actually for us, to be honest. Thank you. So now let's look at that competition that we set 3 weeks ago now. What on earth is this? Now, we had quite a few entries. I'm going to read them to you. They're very similar, but we'll see if anybody got them absolutely right.
Are you going to start?
I'm going to start.
Okay.
Paul G4ZBA says, I think the item this week is some form of high pressure regulator for a cylinder bottle.
Mark M7LLS says, I think it's a valve of a helium balloon inflator. Thanks for the clue.
Bruce G4KZT, yeah, the clue, by the way, and I'm going to tell you the clue. I did say the clue was cheers. That's all I said at the end of it. So that might be relevant here, because Bruce G4KZT says, I think the mystery object is a CO2 regulator, probably for pressurising a beer keg.
Nev M0NFY, just a wild guess, but could it be a gas regulator valve for scuba or welding?
John G0MXN says, I remember seeing valves like the object in Youngman's gun shop in Great Yarmouth, used for recharging very high pressure air guns, similar to paintball gun chargers.
Kevin NZ1, I'm not sure if that's I or L, I think it's I, from Mystic, Connecticut in the US. My guess is an oxygen regulator for medical use.
Paul G3VPT says, is it a device to check and set up the water pressure needed on a heating system?
Tony M0TDK, I think the mystery object is some kind of gas regulator, as it seems to have an on-off valve, a flow control valve and a pressure gauge, possibly part of scuba diving set.
And Keith Oliver, who's not yet licensed, he says, is it an air regulator such as used in welding, for example, to control the pressure of compressed air?
David G3VSJ, hi David and Tammy, pleased to see you guys can get together at the club again. The clue for me is that device has 2000 psi gauge on it, and if my memory serves me correctly, that was the pressure in the full oxygen cylinders in our St John ambulance. So I think that the device is for filling gas cylinders. Regards to all of the club members.
Lovely, thank you, David. And that's all your entries. Anybody else entered it anywhere?
I don't think so, no.
No?
I think that's it.
Okay, so we're going to reveal now what the answer is. And the answer is?
It was a soda stream regulator.
So you were kind of, all of you, right about pressure, what it was doing, but it was specifically for a soda stream which generates soft, what's the gas, CO2?
Yeah.
CO2 for fizzy drinks. And Bob G6PWS sent that in. Lovely. Thank you very much, Bob. So let's have a look at a new competition. You've got a few weeks to think about this, but what on earth is this? Looks a bit evil, doesn't it? Almost sort of.
It kind of looked like a snake, doesn't it? Because of the little bit at the end, it looks like an eyeball.
Yeah, it looks like, I think it's something out of Bond, you know. Anyway, do you know what that is? You've got a few weeks, but we need to know by 3 weeks today what that is. If you know what it is now, don't forget, do it now. Send us an email and we'll include your answers next time we meet. Okay, just time now before we meet our guest tonight to look at what's coming up this week at NARC. I saw actually on BATC that Malcolm G3PDH said that tomorrow night is an SSB C contest tomorrow night. And on Sunday, we've got GB2RS News on GB3NB at 7 o'clock. On Monday, we've got the Monday Night Net at 7:30 also on GB3NB, and at 8:30, 80 metre CW net on 3.543 megahertz. Now, going to tell you about a few weeks now ahead, because we won't be meeting on NARC Live for a few weeks. So next Wednesday, the 29th of June, there is a meeting at CNS School between 7 and 9. This is a social plus an informal round table where Tony, G0MQG, will be showing the basics of how to use an oscilloscope. You have an oscilloscope there, and this is part of our idea to do something specific but very informal like that. So if you've ever always wondered how to use a oscilloscope, then that could be good for you. Or if you're one of our fox hunters, it's our friendly fox hunt competition, which we're starting from Thorpe Recreation Ground from 7 p.m. So they're in different locations. Those are both the club events. I'll actually be at the Thorpe Recreation Ground, as I usually am with the fox hunts. So someone else will be taking the meeting at CNS School. But if you're interested in fox hunting, if you have never done it and you want to have a look, get there in good time, probably just before 7. If you're interested in the sort of equipment and things that are used, then you can have a look at people's equipment before they speed off at about sort of 7:30 or so, something like that. So get there at 7 o'clock if you can. That's next Wednesday, the 29th of June. The following Wednesday is the 6th of July. And this is a meeting at CNS School, and it's a social. And there's also an informal round table, and the subject, well, you decide. If you would like to hear and like to either bring something in that you know about, or you'd like to learn more about, if you let me know, we'll find someone to help with that. And that's the idea of these. All that may not happen. If you just want as a social, that's absolutely fine as well. We meet at CNS, the sixth form common room, between 7 and 9. I'm just going to mention as well the week after that, which is the 13th of July, and that's when we'll be back with you here on NARC Live. We've got a very interesting talk coming up on battery technology for portable use with Bill G4ERV. That's something quite new. I don't think we've ever done a talk on batteries, and that's really can be very interesting, I think, especially if you like working portable. So there we are. That's your next 3 weeks coming up on NARC Live, and don't forget, as I said, to keep in touch with what you've been doing, your news, views, pictures. We'll show you some pictures later that Tammy took this morning, actually. We love to hear from you. And also don't forget this club card, which we're always happy to send to anyone you know. Just send us their name and address, and we'll add your name to ours and send them to us. We send one nearly every week, at least once. radio@dcpmicro.com for everything to do with NARC Live, and indeed the club as well. So we're nearly ready, and I hope he's there still. So Carl, this is your notice to show your camera, because you were there a little while ago, but your camera's blank at the moment, because we're going to meet Carl, K9LA. We've met Carl for several times over the past few years, always talking about propagation cycle 25. But he's coming to us now live from Indiana. He's enabled his camera, and I'm glad to say he's with us now. So good evening to you, or from us anyway. Good evening, Carl.
Hello to everyone. Hopefully everyone's doing okay over there and enjoying the opening up of conventions and all that.
Yes, indeed. We were having a quick chat, weren't we, before you came on air, and a lot of conventions have started for you in the States as well, of course, Dayton and other ones as well you said you've been to recently.
Yeah. The Friedrichshafen, not this year, maybe next year.
Right.
Vicki and I have been once, and well, we'll see. A lot of things happen.
Yeah, I'm hoping to make that again one day. If I can persuade Tammy as well, that would be nice to go to that myself as well. But that's going to start in the next couple of days. I think it starts Friday, actually.
Yes, yeah. And of course, that's this weekend. Coming weekend is field day in the U.S. too. So that
right. Okay.
Makes a little problem for a lot of people.
Yeah, sure. Anyway, it's really good to see you again, Carl. We have had the pleasure of your company the last few years, really, talking about this, and I'm hoping that you've got some really good news for us. So we'll leave you into your presentation now, and as always at home, if you've got any questions or comments to ask Carl, then please feel free to do so either on BATC or Facebook, and we'll read them to Carl at the end. But now, over to you, Carl.
Okay, thank you, David, and Tammy also. Hopefully Roger's in there. We'll see. But I'm Carl, K9LA, in the state of Indiana. We're up in the northeast corner, kind of close to Michigan and Ohio. And it's about in the low 90s today here. So Finally, summer has arrived. Yeah, the last time was June of 2021. So I'll just bring cycle 25 up to date. And then I thought, since it's June, I'd dig deeper into sporadic e-propagation and show some good stuff here that I don't think I ever showed before. I was looking at the 2021 presentation, and it didn't get in too deep into sporadic E. So, okay, let's see if I can advance the screen, of course. There we go. Yeah, there's the agenda. Just two major things, cycle 25. Look at historical data again and look at the predictions and the latest data. And we'll look at short-term opportunities on HF and 6 meters, because cycle 25 isn't way up there yet. We're still probably about halfway to the peak or something like that. And we'll look at some history of solar and ionospheric stuff. It's pretty interesting how a lot of things came to be. Then the second major topic is sporadic E. Look at what are the short-term probabilities for sporadic E, what are long-term, and then dig into G3YLA's EPI, sporadic E probability index a little bit deeper than last year. So, cycle 25. It began in 1755, cycle 1. That's when we determined that the sunspot number data was good enough to really make it official. There's a plot of all the previous 24 solar cycles, the maximum smooth sunspot number that they reached. And what's kind of obvious is we've gone through 3 periods of big solar cycles and 2 periods of small solar cycles. And cycle 24 was the smallest in our lifetimes. It was the 4th smallest in recorded history, all the way back to 1755. So that's the big question. Is cycle 25 going to get us out of this 3rd period of small solar cycles? Again, I'm aware of 56 predictions for cycle 25. That's just because we don't fully understand what's going on. There appears to be a consensus among solar scientists, but remember, just because they all agree doesn't mean it's going to be correct. The sun's going to do what it wants to do, not what we expect it to do. But there's the distribution of those 56 predictions. Most, 50 of the 56, 89%, are for a below average solar cycle. Oh, wow. For a higher HF band enthusiasts, that's not a good thing, but we'll see what happens. There were 3 predictions for an average cycle. Now there are 4. Why is that? Because one of the 3 for a larger than average cycle was revised downward to an average cycle. So right now there are only 2 larger than average predictions. I really need to dig into those and see what their methodology was and see how likely things may be happening. One of the original predictions from Dr. Scott McIntosh of National Center for Atmospheric Research in Boulder, Colorado, was in June 2020, and he and his colleagues predicted a very big cycle. And in August 2021, they revised that prediction down to more of an average type solar cycle. And that was because something they expected to happen didn't happen until much later. So there's still 2 predictions for a big solar cycle. All we can do is wait and see what happens. So here's really what matters. You know, predictions are great, but looking at actual data is really what tells what's going on. And what I've got is the cycle 25 is the big thick red curve. we have 24 months of smooth sunspot data. Okay, the green curve is the small cycle 24. You can see it's small, smaller than the other two that are above it. Orange is what an average cycle looks like cycle 23, which peaked in 2020 or so. Then the blue is a moderately big solar cycle, like cycle 21 that peaked in 1979. At my presentation last June, we only had 12 months of data. So things are looking more, are more encouraging right now. You know, after about 12 months of data, it sure looked like cycle 25 was just going to follow cycle 24. But the last 12 months have picked up, and it looks like cycle 25 is doing better than the small cycle 24. Will it get up to an average cycle? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see what happens. But regardless of all this, where we are right now in a solar cycle is we still need more sunspots for worldwide propagation on 15, 12, and 10 meters via the F2 region on a daily basis. We don't have that yet. Mostly we see north-south openings. That's for North America, that's for Europe. Very consistent. So what can we do? Yeah, that's right. Okay. So here's what HF propagation is going to be like probably through the fall and winter of this year. Of course, 160, 80, and 60 should be good at night unless there are thunderstorms or other noise sources. And that's why it may help if you get on those bands to have a receive antenna. Now, it doesn't have to be a beverage or a four square. It could be a small loop that would null out noise if it's coming from one direction. So, you know, think about that. 40 and 30, well, should be good during the day for shorter distance QSOs and should be great at night for long distance QSOs. 20 and 17, well, they should be good during the day. And are there enough sunspots yet for good nighttime propagation on 2017 past sunset? It's kind of iffy at the moment, but it does happen. Of course, the digital modes sure help. 15, 12, and 10, the higher HF bands. Well, mostly, like I said, there are north-south openings in the daytime. And after sunset, things don't, there isn't that much propagation. Now, we should see a very good improvement this coming fall and winter for two reasons. Well, the first reason, of course, is that cycle 25 is going to get higher. It's going to get bigger, so that's going to help. The second reason is in the northern hemisphere, the fall and winter months are very good for F2 region ionization. So that's going to pick up also. And so I think we're going to see much improved north-south propagation and more east-west paths, you know, like North America to Europe, or Europe to North America, Europe to Japan. And of course, you should always watch for sporadic E on 10 and 15 right now in the summer months and also in December. Now, to reiterate, we still have a way to go before the higher HF bands will be open daily on a worldwide basis via the F2 region. Now, what we can do, though, we can keep an eye on the daily sunspot number and the daily 10.7 centimeter solar flux. And here's a plot from the website that's the URL that's identified in blue there on that plot. solon.info/solar. Let me minimize something so I can see my screen. There we go. And that's a plot for July 5th of 2021 to June 20th of 2022. So it's a close to a year's plot of the daily sunspot number in red, the daily 10.7 centimeter solar flux in black, the daily A index which is tells us how active the Earth's magnetic field is in blue. And you can see there's been some spikes, but nothing real major. On the left of the chart, we were coming out of solar minimum. So there aren't many spikes in the sunspot number and the solar flux, but as you can see, as we progress to the right, progress towards the current day, there are more and more spikes. And that's one thing you should kind of keep an eye on. When the solar flux and the sunspot number spike, that could give us some short-term openings on the higher HF bands. And I highlight one of those spikes in green, about a third of the way over from the left. That was CQROIDX phone in 2021. The bands were really good. We had worldwide propagation on 15 and 10. And if the spike in the solar flux and the sunspot number happen to fall during a contest weekend, well, that'll be good. There's no guarantee that the spikes will occur at the times we want, nor is there any guarantee that things will get better, but it's worthwhile taking a look because you may be surprised at what's happening. And you can also see there's on the black solar flux, there's a line that goes through all those spikes. That's the 81-day average, and you can see the average is going up, and that just means cycle 25 is increasing. So that's good. Cycle 25 is alive. Like I said, keep an eye on the solar flux and the sunspot number. Also keep an eye on the K index. The K index is the 3-hour index indicating the activity of the Earth's magnetic field. When the Earth's magnetic field is quiet, the F2 region of the ionosphere is quiet and it's well behaved. When the K index spikes up, the Earth's magnetic field becomes disturbed, and that affects the F2 region, mostly in a bad way, but there can be some positive enhancements. And here's good examples. You can see on August 5th of 2011, the K index spiked up to 5 and 6 later in the day on August 5th. And you can see what happened to the maximum usable frequency over the Peru ionoson. The next day it took a big dip. So that was unfortunate that nothing good happened. But if you look at the Eglin Air Force Base in Florida, there's the same spike in the K index late on August 25th. And look what happened to the F2 region. The MUF took a nice positive enhancement for a short period. And if you were in the right place at the right time, you could have taken advantage of some good stuff. And what that says is the F2 region is very dynamic. Positive enhancement due to a spike in the K index may not occur at all latitudes, but it's still certainly worth looking at. Another great example was the California QSO party in 2018. I did not hear any W6 stations here in the Midwest on 10 meters on Saturday. And looking at the Boulder ionoson data, which is about the midpoint of a path from California to the Midwest, you can see the MUF was only around 20 megahertz for the days up to the contest and on the Saturday of the contest. So that says 10 meters was not open on Saturday. But on Sunday, the K index spiked up to 5. And look what happened later on Sunday. The MUF over Boulder was enhanced to a little bit greater than 30 megahertz. And sure enough, worked lots of W6 stations on Sunday during the California QSO party. So keep an eye on the K index. If you're a big HF aficionado, you may be rewarded. So talking about sunspots and solar flux, well, why are sunspots important? Well, The white area around a sunspot, you can see that in the photo, is called a plage, which is French for beach. You know, think of a white beach. Those white areas emit extreme ultraviolet radiation, EUV. And extreme ultraviolet radiation is what ionizes the atmosphere at F2 region altitudes. So when there are more sunspots, there are more plage areas. That means there's more EUV. That means the F2 region is more highly ionized. So sunspots themselves do not have anything to do with ionization, just like 10.7 centimeter solar flux has nothing to do with it. They're just proxies for the extreme ultraviolet radiation. And of course, the F2 region is responsible for most of our long distance QSOs and most QSOs at night. The black areas, that's sunspot, that's the umbra. The orangish areas are the penumbra. And umbra comes from Latin for, oh shoot, I forgot.
I can't help you, I'm afraid, Carl.
Yeah, my Latin isn't, of course I never had Latin.
We'll see if
okay,
somebody helps you online, and I'll come back to you if they do.
No, umbra Latin is for shadow, and penumbra is almost shadow. So I guess, you know, a lot of Latin influence back then. Mm. So here's something that's interesting. Perhaps you haven't seen it before, but it's called a butterfly diagram because it kind of looks like a butterfly, a monarch butterfly. And what it shows is where sunspots emerge during a solar cycle. I've highlighted cycle 19 there, the red annotation, and also cycle 23. I couldn't find any more data past cycle 23. You know, there should be cycle 24 data. I'm sure it's out there, but I didn't find it. And if you look at cycle 19, you can see that sunspots from a new cycle start at the higher solar latitudes. And as the cycle progresses, they emerge at lower and lower latitudes. Near solar minimum, they are close to the solar equator. So that's one way to tell which cycle a sunspot belongs to. If it's at high latitudes, it's probably the start of a new cycle. If it's at kind of near the solar equator, then it's probably the end of the cycle. The other way is to tell by the polarity of the sunspots. That gets into the magnetic field of the sunspots, and so scientists can pretty much tell which cycle a sunspot belongs to. There are some, just like everything, there are some abnormalities that sometimes a sunspot doesn't follow the rules, but most of the time it does. There's a brief history of solar discoveries. Of course, the Chinese were observing sunspots, over 2,000 years ago. Unfortunately, the records aren't good enough to go back that far with good sound data. 1610, Galileo invented the telescope. That sure helped. In 1843, a guy named Schwab figured out that, hey, those sunspots kind of come and go in about an 11-year cycle. So he's credited with the discovery of the 11-year solar cycle. In 1849, Adolf Wolf came up with a method to count sunspots so that everybody could count them the same. Now, it's still humans counting stuff, so it's kind of subjective, but the equation was done to try and make things consistent between all the observers. In 1902, K9LA from the US and Heaviside from the UK suggested independently that the Earth's upper atmosphere consisted of an electrically conductive region. And that came out of the fact that Marconi, of course, in 1901, heard the signals from the UK. And they suggested that, hey, there's something electrical up there that conducts. In 1914, another step forward. And I mentioned Dr. Scott McIntosh. What he and his colleagues are looking at is really the 22-year cycle. A guy named Hale said, hey, really, it's not an 11-year cycle, it's a 22-year cycle because the sun's polarity flips at solar maximum. So it takes really 2 cycles to get back to the original polarity of the sun's magnetic field. Now, in 1924, another UK scientist, Appleton, found conclusive evidence of an electrically conductive region by measuring the angle of arrival of radio waves from a nearby transmitter. So it was kind of obvious. They went up, got reflected back down, and based on the angles, he could determine the height, which was around 100 and something kilometers, 105 or 110. Now, in 1925, those 2 guys demonstrated the existence of the ionosphere with the first ionoson. What's an ionoson? It's just a radar looking straight up, and its stepped frequency is started at about 2 megahertz. And you increment the frequency up, and from that, you can determine the condition of the ionosphere and also determine parameters of the E region and the F2 region that help in eventually predicting propagation. In 1930, Pettit found a relationship between sunspots and EUV. Remember I said that EUV is the true ionizing radiation of the F2 region? Well, he said, well, those plages are tied to sunspots. So that gave us a good idea on what's going on. Of course, in 57 and 58, the International Geophysical Year made worldwide measurements of the ionosphere. And of course, that led to the first model of the ionosphere in the 70s. And that eventually led to the first propagation prediction program for amateur radio. In 1978, it was called Minimuff. So lots of good history there. And of course, it took a couple centuries, but we finally got there. And who knows what the next couple centuries will produce. Maybe we'll eventually have a very good understanding of the solar cycle. On why sunspots are generated and how they're generated. And I really do suspect that what Dr. Scott McIntosh and his colleagues are doing they're on the right track by trying to understand what's going on inside the sun. So we'll have to wait and see what happens. What are the bands doing right now? That's always a great question. One thing you can do, you can go to dxmaps.com, and there's just a picture from June 9th, 6 meters. And you can see there was lots of sporadic E going on on the eastern part of the US. You can select any band from 2200 meters, which is 137 kilohertz, to above 432 megahertz. So it'll give you a pretty good idea who's working who right now, which really does tell you what the ionosphere is doing right now. There are other methods. KC2G has a MUF map, maximum usable frequency map. By the way, David, I'll send you a PDF of this presentation in case anyone wants to go look at those URLs.
Thank you.
The KC2G map, he downloads ionoson data, translates it to the MUF over the ionoson, and plots all that on a world view and adds contour lines to connect equal MUF values. So from that you can eyeball in a path and see what the MUF might be. There's PSK Reporter, WhisperNet, the Reverse Beacon Network. If you transmit in a certain format, You can then go listen to software-defined radios around the world and see where you were received. Wow, that's a great way to tell what the band's doing, isn't it? IARU Northern California DX Foundation beacons. There are 18 worldwide. There are more coming online. Each of the 18 beacons transmits for 10 seconds on a band. So in 3 minutes, you can get a good picture of what the worldwide propagation is on a band. And in that 10-second period, each of the beacons starts at 100 watts, then drops down to 10 watts, 1 watt, and 100 milliwatts. And I've listened, and lots of times on 20, and especially, and even on 10 meters when we got lots of sunspots, you can hear the signal from 100 watts down to 100 milliwatts, which is 30 dB. That's only about 6 S units. So, you know, if your signal's about S9 plus 20, 30 dB, you're still going to hear it. Lots of good propagation. So use a method to determine what's going on in the bands, and you'll be helpful. Okay, what about disturbances to propagation? That's what can screw things up. So here's a little chart that kind of, in some text that shows and tells when disturbances occurs. There are 3 general categories of disturbances, and that comes from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration here in the US, NOAA. There are geomagnetic storms, and those are because of coronal mass ejections and also coronal holes. The coronal mass ejections are most prevalent around solar max. Coronal holes are most prevalent during the decline of a solar cycle. Another category of disturbances is solar radiation storms, and that comes from big solar flares. They're most prevalent around solar max, and solar radiation storms increase the absorption in the D region in the polar cap, which is the area inside the aurora oval. So if you have an over the pole path, for example, for me, that would be like to India. For you, probably out into the Pacific somewhere. That could be a problem. The third category of disturbances is radio blackouts. And that also comes from a big solar flare. And it causes more absorption on the daylight side of Earth, which, if you ever heard of radio blackout, the signals just go away. But the recovery is usually within an hour. But it can be quite interesting when you actually hear one. And as I said much earlier, we're about halfway up cycle 25. So maybe 2 more years, 3 more years to cycle 25's peak. And right now, if you look at geomagnetic indices that tell how active the Earth's magnetic field is, right now we're at the quietest time of a solar cycle. But as we move up, it will become more and more disturbed because of solar flares and CMEs. That's the way it goes. We have to take the bad, which are disturbances, with the good. More sunspots, more ionization for the F2 region, and the better the propagation on the higher HF bands. But they can be more disturbed. Okay, what about sporadic E? We'll talk about that for a while. I showed this before. I've cleaned it up, made it in color now. It just shows what's the most likely time for 6-meter propagation via sporadic E. And you're probably quite aware that the summer months are best. And there are 2 times during the day when sporadic E is most likely. It's late morning and early evening. You can see there's also a probability in December. The green areas are the highest probabilities, and it's kind of obvious: late morning, early evening in the summer, and then late early evening in the December timeframe. So that's a short-term probability. What about long-term sporadic E? Does it happen all the time, every year? Yeah, it kind of does. Victor Echo 3 Echo November, he does the solarham.net website. He took data for 11 years on 6 meter QSOs, and he recorded QSOs between Eastern and Western Europe to the eastern half of North America. And you can see what the eastern half of North America was defined as, what US call areas and Canadian call areas. Now, he didn't record just one QSO. He had, when a station made 5 or more contacts between other stations. So that helps kind of define things better. Now, what the y-axis is the percentage of the 11 years that QSOs were made. So we're in late June, and what it says is, for those 11 years of data, we had 6 meter sporadic E openings on about 8 of those 11 years. Not bad. US, like I mentioned, US Field Day is coming up here this weekend. So there's a really good chance of sporadic E, and hopefully everybody will be happy with 6 meters and also listening on 10 meters. Now, G3YLA has derived a EPI forecast. E stands for sporadic E, P stands for probability, I is index. So sporadic E probability index. And what he looks at is events in the troposphere, basically. He looks at a lot of them, and what he does is plots his probability of a sporadic E cloud happening. And you can see the color code down there. The more purplish and whitish, that means the probability of sporadic E cloud is really good. Now, what I did is I put a common path from the east coast of the US to Europe. It's about 7,500 kilometers. We think that would take 4 hops, because sporadic E is limited to about 2,000 kilometers per hop. So there's 1 hop, 2 hops, 3 hops, 4 hops. And it says that, well, maybe something good should happen. But what was the mode for those QSOs? If there was a QSO on the previous slide, could it have been 4 ES hops? 4 hops via sporadic E? Well, I suppose it could. That means you'd need 4 sporadic E clouds, or maybe just 2 very large clouds. Now, for a 4 hop sporadic E mode, we'd need 4 strong ES clouds, or 2 very large strong ES clouds that can reflect the signal all the way back to ground. Now, the other possibility is something like a chordal hop. What you'd need is just 2 sporadic E clouds. And for this chordal hop mode, you don't have to bend the signal all the way back to ground, just enough to follow the Earth, the curvature of the Earth. So that's a very good possibility. Now, if we go back and look at 4 hops, the cloud would have to be at the middle of each of those 4 hops. And there's a problem with the second hop. At least the probability says there would be. And what that kind of leads you to the chordal hop, which means all you'd need is a good sporadic E cloud at the middle of the first hop and around the middle of the 4th hop. And it looks like, yeah, that's where the probability kind of says what happened. We'll probably never know what really happened, but it's a lot of fun to speculate and look at data and see if you can figure stuff out. Now, here's dxmaps.com at the same time and day as the G3YLA EPI index, EPI forecast. And sure looks like The EPI forecast is pretty good, but there's really a lot more validation required. I don't know if Jim's doing that or someone else is doing it, but
well, we can find out actually, because I happen to know he's watching this now, because I saw an earlier.
Hey, Jim.
He was one of the ones who, I don't know if you watched our competition, but he was one of the ones who got the quick on the Morse drop with the Morsel program. So I know he's there. So maybe Jim will tell us later on. Okay.
Yeah, that would be great, Jim. If you good to see you, good to hear you, and hope to see you. And maybe you can comment on validating your EPI forecasts. That would be a great forward move for trying to figure out when to get on for 6 meter sporadic E. So here's my summary. Cycle 25 is certainly in its ascent. Solar max around 2025. It's kind of a loose term. If it starts rising faster than it is right now, then it'll happen a little bit earlier. It kind of looks like another smallish cycle. And this next 6 to 12 months should pin things down better. It's kind of suggesting maybe it's going to get up to an average cycle, like cycle 23. That would be great for the higher HF bands. But even if it ends up a small cycle like cycle 24, around solar maximum, we should see great worldwide propagation on the higher HF bands on 6 meters with modest power and modest antennas in the fall and winter months. So there's always hope. The worst case, of course, is if we had another Maunder minimum, then we'd really struggle. But certainly we're not going to have another Maunder minimum. Of course, the digital modes offer an advantage over CW and sideband, and how much an advantage depends on which digital mode. And that has been just a significant advantage on 10 and 6 meters. This last solar minimum has been the most active on the higher HF bands and 6 meters because of the digital modes. Normally, we just go there, don't hear anything, and we go somewhere else. But the last solar minimum was the most active in history on 6 and 10 meters because of the digital modes. Take advantage of the summer ES season. There's probably a big sporadic E opening right now because we're not at our radios, right? That's what usually happens. And there are tools on the internet to determine what the bands are doing right now, and take advantage of them. Just because you know what the solar flux is and the K index is, that doesn't necessarily tell you what the ionosphere is doing, because the ionosphere can do short-term enhancements that we just don't have in our models yet. We just don't understand the dynamic rate or the dynamic variability of the F2 region. So the solar flux and the K index will give you a general idea, but there could be some surprising things that are happening. And it all has to do with a spike in the solar flux and the sunspot number, and also a spike in the K index. So that's all I had, David. If there are any questions, I'd be glad to try and answer them.
Thank you very much, Carl.
Tammy's got some pictures, right?
Well, we have. I was going to show those in a moment, but I want to go to the questions first and comments, and then we'll show you some pictures that Tammy happened to take this morning of some sunspots here in Norfolk. But firstly, actually, one of the things that was mentioned was, let me see, where was it? An umbra. Tony M0TDK says an umbra is a shadow, and a little bit more of a bigger explanation enlarged on that was Ralph Term 0 RHT says the conical shadow excluding light from a celestial body. So there we are. That's they came back on those.
Great.
Now we've by the way, Roger G3LDI is definitely watching as well. He did say he's come back and said that. So let's take the first question. Was Rodney G0CBO says these last 2 weeks my 6 meter FT8 sits were reported on USA East Coast. Was this F2 or multi-hop sporadic E? And by the way, he adds there this was via PSK reporter.
Okay. More than likely, I'd say it was sporadic E. We just don't have, normally we just don't have enough ionization in the F2 region where we are in the solar cycle to have 6 meter F2. But remember those plots I showed? That if the K index spikes up, there can be a positive enhancement. Well, back in April, there was another one. I didn't put it in here, but there was a spike in the K index, and the ionosons at the lower latitudes here in the US showed that the F2 region ionization peaked well above 50 megahertz. And there was F2 propagation, not transequatorial, but just normal F2 propagation, which that shouldn't occur where we are in the solar cycle. But like I said, the F2 region is very dynamic. Short-term events can happen. And I would have to guess if it was in the summer, so I'd have to guess more than likely it was some form of sporadic E. Was it multi-hop, chordal hop? I don't know. I'm not sure we'll ever figure it out unless someone invents a pair of glasses that translates RF up to visual frequencies. So we can see what's going on.
That would be good to see, wouldn't it? You'd be able to look out and see.
Yeah.
That would be really good.
I mean, we didn't even see that in Star Trek, so who knows?
No, that's exactly right. Jim G3YLA came back actually on your question, said, "Hi Carl, lots of work ongoing and doing verification work on this year's data." And 73s from Jim.
Excellent, Jim. Yeah, looking forward to see that when you've got enough data and enough analysis. I'm sure all the 6 meter operators will be looking for it too.
I don't know if you caught this. By the way, anybody at home now, if you've got any questions or comments on your experience with propagation and things as it is now, or whatever, please put them on Facebook and BATC now. Now, I don't know if you see this magazine over your way, the Radcom, which is obviously the magazine of the RSGB, which is the equivalent of your ARRL. But that front picture, actually, Tammy's got a much better picture, which I think she can show you, actually. Just put you on the spot.
Do you want me to stop sharing my screen?
Doesn't matter. No, you can leave that. That's fine. In case anybody asks anything on it, that doesn't stop us doing this. But Tammy's just going to show you now the picture. This is the front page because this is a stunning photograph, actually, of some sunspots. But there's a whole article inside, and it's a little bit controversial. And it's not from. I mean, it says it's controversial. In fact, the title there, you might not be able to read it. It says a controversial theory regarding sunspot predictions, and that include things like the Scott-Hale cycle and things like that. And we actually had a program about that ourselves on our program. But I just thought I'd mention that for anybody who's interested in a further. It's not predicting sunspots and predicting where propagation clearly is it's even with all the fantastic computer power and all the experts that we have in the world now, it's not easy, is it?
No, it isn't. And that's what it is what Dr. Scott is doing and his colleagues, Howell, Frank Howell, he's a K4, I believe. Their work is controversial because, like we saw, most of the other solar scientists said it's going to be a small cycle. And Scott and Frank say, well, it's going to be bigger than that. So all I can say, let's see what happens in about 2 or 3 years. Yeah.
Well, as you mentioned earlier, and as we mentioned just before, for those of you interested, and I think if you're like me, and I'm just an average radio amateur, honestly, and in fact probably below average in terms of how much I actually do of radio, but when you see all this wonderful stuff in journals like Radcom and the ARRL and all of those sorts of things, you sometimes feels very remote. Well, just by pure chance this morning, I went out to see what Tammy was doing in the back garden, and she was taking some pictures of the sun using, now I should have just put a warning here, I'm sure everybody watching this knows, you should never ever look at the sun yourself directly or with any other piece of equipment unless it's been specifically designed. So in the picture we're going to show you now, which is what Tammy took, do you want to show this now, Tammy, actually, which is what Tammy took just with her, let's face it, a modest telescope, a £200 telescope, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And your iPhone.
Yeah.
Do you want to explain what this is anyway, what you're showing here?
It's a very amateur picture.
That's okay, but you said that, but I wanted you, I persuaded you to show this tonight, didn't I?
Yeah. So it's just basically holding my phone up to the eyepiece. I've got just a simple solar filter that I just put over the end. I'll show you a picture of that in a minute. The one on the right is blue because I bought a new filter a few weeks ago and I just wanted to see what the effect was on it. It's not specifically designed for the sun, but I put that in line with this solar filter as well. But yeah, you can see it's quite, that was about sort of 10 o'clock this morning. It's quite a big one on there.
And it's amazing what you can do, you know, with a modest telescope, Tammy, and isn't it? And
Yeah.
to make, and why it's relevant to this, Carl, apart from obviously this is what a lot of what you do, but it does make it feel more real somehow. You know, we talk about sunspots,
Yes.
minimum, and things like that, but you don't often see it. So to actually experience it in our own back garden, when Tammy was looking at it, I couldn't believe it, and I thought we really should just show people that you can do this with very modest equipment. Tammy, do you want to show a picture of the?
That's just the telescope.
So the one on the right is a telescope.
Yeah,
Again, that's
I've got the camera as well, but there's not a picture from that.
so the solar filter on the top,
Yeah,
just
there's-
clipped onto the top.
There's the solar filter, which is made out of an old tumble
Yeah,
dry vent.
Yeah. So there we.
maybe Radcom will give you guys a little bit of room in the issue and describe the telescope and show the picture and.
It is nice, isn't it? I mean, it literally was Tammy holding her iPhone up to the eyepiece on that, really relatively modest sort of telescope. So thanks for doing that, Tammy, because when I mentioned it to Tammy, I said, "Oh, you've got to show that tonight," and she wasn't too keen, to be honest, because it's just literally a quick taken picture. But I thought it was relevant to everything tonight. I don't know if we've got any other questions from anything here. We've got we've got Justin G8YTZ says. 11th of the 4th, 22. Very strong contacts on 6 meters SSB in Poland and Hungary. Whisper was heard in Turkey the same day here in southeast London, he says. So I think it's just a comment really for you, Carl.
Okay, yeah.
Bit of feedback. I mean, it is extraordinary. In fact, I wasn't going to mention this at all. I'm not sure if Kevin M0G is watching, but last night I popped into his shack. And he just popped his radio on, and he worked basically. So we're in the east coast of England, I think you know that, and
Yes.
much further, sort of. And he's in northish North Norfolk, place called North Walsham, Lowestoft, which is not very far away. It's probably 30 or 40 miles. But he was working Lowestoft on as lower rate settings as his 9700 radio would go. It was working it on milliwatts. It was literally it was less than a watt, and because the conditions last night, and so it just shows you how conditions are very much changing. And so it's probably then, do you think, Carl, a good time to get into the hobby and to experiment with aerials and different bands?
Oh yeah, it's a great time. I'm sure a lot of people who were just licensed within the past several years kind of wonder why even get on the higher HF bands in 6 meters. More than likely, all you heard was noise. But now we got the digital modes. FT8 has taken off in 2017, and cycle 25 is ramping up. So it's going to be a great time, and lots of opportunities to kind of do what Tammy did. Just have some fun and do some stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I know that there's several, quite a few people don't like particularly FT8 and things, but at least it's kept our hobby alive and has meant that you've been able to make long distance contacts where otherwise the bands would have been dead for a lot of people, wouldn't they, without it? So, but maybe now we can get back to some of those traditional modes and see what we can do now that propagation's on its way up. Well, Carl, we don't have any other questions or anything for you, but it's really good to have that update on cycle 25. For the last 2 times I think we've had you here, it has always been just on the cusp, but we're very much, it's really good to know that we're very much on the up now with that. And I'd like to thank you very much indeed for giving us this great update. Thank you very much, Carl.
Oh, you're welcome, David and Tammy and everyone else there. And glad to do it. And hopefully we'll see you next year. And maybe we'll have a much better idea where cycle 25 is going.
Look, it looks that way to me. You're thinking 2024
Yeah.
at the moment, 25, aren't you? But we'll have other update from you. Thank you ever so much, Carl.
Okay.
Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
7-3.
Okay.
There we are. That's Carl, K9LA, coming to us from Indiana with an update on the Cycle 25 propagation. So thanks very much to him, and thanks for all your questions and feedback tonight as well. By the way, Justin put an apology. That contact that he mentioned was on the 11th of June, so only a couple of weeks ago, something like that, right? Not back in April. But that's about it for NARC Live. So as I said to you, we'll see you in 3 weeks' time. Let's just have a look at what's coming up in the next week in NARC. Tomorrow night is the SSB Club Championship contest. And Sunday it's GB2RS News on GB3MB at 7 o'clock. On Monday night it's 7:30. It's Monday Night Net on GB3MB as well. And 8 it's 80 metres CW Net on 3.543 megahertz. And then next Wednesday, the 29th of June, there is a meeting at CNS School between 7 and 9, including a round table on using an oscilloscope, or if you'd like to take part in our friendly fox hunt, the direction finding competition, or want to see what it's all about, then meet us at the Thorpe Recreation Ground from 7 o'clock. And the week after that, the 6th of July, we've got the meeting at CNS School, again with a social informal. If you'd like us to talk about something particular on the informal round table, let us know. And then we're back here for NARC Live in 3 Wednesdays' time on the 13th of July for a presentation on battery technology. And of course, we'll see you hopefully at Barford. Tammy and I will be there, and lots of other people will be there at Barford Radio Rally on the 3rd of July. We look forward to seeing you then. But from us, until then...
You don't know what you're saying, do you?
You get that kind of out of practice. We almost get used to saying this without looking at the script. But anyway, from Tammy MQ0TC...
It's because you've got the Q's in it. That's what you're going to say, isn't it?
Well,
have I got to say bye now?
If you like.
Bye!
And from me, David GQ7URP. Take care of yourselves. Look after each other. And we'll see you again in 3 weeks' time for NARC Live, or hopefully at Barford or at the school before then. Until then, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.